Hello everyone and welcome. So in today's video, I'm going to go through some key people in the Tudor time period and pick a class for them. I was going to continue with scene 2 for my game, but I decided to create something more fun that is slightly quicker to prepare as I've got a busy weekend. So, for my game I've already given Anne Boleyn and Thomas Cromwell their classes, which I'll briefly run through, but those characters have videos dedicated to them, which I'll link in the description. So the other people I'm choosing to create characters of in this video are unlikely to be in my game. This is more of an exercise in character creation and plotting. You can probably guess who my first character will be. It's no other than Henry VIII. So Henry VIII is a bit of a mysterious character in a way, as many historians have speculated on why he was so brutal with his treatment of his wives. But there isn't a clear answer to that, I'm afraid. I mean, the closest thing I read that could go so far in explaining his behaviour was that he was overindulged as a child because his brother was supposed to be king, not him. His brother Arthur was king for a while until he passed away, like from sweating sickness or tuberculosis. And for those who don't know, Henry VIII married his brother's widow, Catherine of Aragon. So for Henry VIII, this may surprise a lot of you, but I think I'll choose Bard for him. He was very fond of court and was a remarkable composer. Actually, on that note, pun intended, he didn't compose Greensleeves, which is quite a common misunderstanding. Yet despite that, his love of music was the most stable thing about him. If I had to choose a college, I'd say College of Swords, as Henry VIII liked a good war. He was also very athletic in his youth and enjoyed pastimes such as hunting and jousting. So for my next Tudor character, I'm going to choose Elizabeth I. So Elizabeth's, let's say, motivations can be tricky, especially with religion, as she was very private about her beliefs, which I think rules her out as a cleric, unlike her mother Anne Boleyn. I know Elizabeth loved dancing, singing and all the performance and drama of courtly life, so in that respect she would make a good bard as well. She could also play several instruments. Perhaps she takes after her father in that respect. However, she was very astute and cunning, and I think a bard would only represent the more carefree side of her. Also, for the sake of this video, I want to mix it up a bit and choose a class that hasn't been mentioned yet. Now Elizabeth was very studious from a young age, so I think like Thomas Cromwell she would make a good wizard. She learned a lot of languages from a young age and could apparently speak an impressive 9. To shed some light on this, here is a quote from Giovanni Carlo Scaramelli. I hope I pronounced that right, Venetian secretary in England. Now I do take this with a little pinch of salt, as I think there is a bit of exaggeration going on here. So according to Giovanni, Elizabeth possessed 9 languages so thoroughly that each appeared to be her native tongue. 5 of these were the languages of the peoples governed by her: English, Welsh, Cornish, Scottish and Irish. All of them are so different that it is impossible for those who speak the one to understand any of the others. Besides this, she spoke perfectly Latin, French and Italian extremely well. Her tutor Roger Ascham said of her, "I have dealt with many learned ladies, but among them all the brightest star is my illustrious Lady Elizabeth." So I think Wizard is a good class based on her academic achievement and studious nature. When I was revising all the Wizard subclasses, I was torn between a few. First I was drawn to Abjuration, as Elizabeth had a ruthless spy network and was very secretive, and dare I say paranoid. The vast network of spies who protected her was mainly headed up by Sir Francis Walsingham. Apparently he recruited merchants into his network because they could easily move around Europe without raising suspicion. Anyway, back to Elizabeth. She kept her circle of allies small to stop infighting and could be very protective of them, provided they didn't get on the wrong side of her, which does fit with Abjuration-leaning wizards. Enchantment was another close runner, as she was very witty and clever and used this to her advantage. But the subclass I chose, which could be controversial, is Divination. She was always watching and waiting, carefully choosing her friends and enemies. She was steadfast in many decisions, particularly marriage and naming an heir. So I'm going to include Anne Boleyn in this video, despite already making a video of her, which I will link to in the description. That video goes into way more detail, for example the type of spell she will have and her stats. Anne, like Henry, was very musical. However, she was also deeply studious and academic. I mean, maybe it was this trait that was passed on to her daughter Elizabeth. So yeah, Anne, one could say, had many depths. So while she's very musical, I feel her interest in religion maybe supersedes that, and is of course a bigger plot point, being the driver of her demise. As you may or may not know, Henry VIII's relationship with other European countries, which were Catholic, was beginning to sour, because he split with the Catholic Church to marry Anne. This was one of the main reasons he wanted a new, less controversial wife who could provide him with a male heir. And because he had already divorced his last wife, Catherine of Aragon, divorce wasn't an option, especially with the already inflamed relations between him and the other powerful Catholic countries. Anne will be a knowledge domain cleric, so she will worship gods that value learning and understanding. I also think this fits in well with her reformist pursuits, such as wanting the Bible written in common English, so people could read it for themselves. Right, next up is Mary Tudor, or Mary I, or even Bloody Mary, as she was also known. Now, Mary I had quite a traumatic upbringing, much like her other siblings. So for those who don't know, Mary I was Henry VIII's child with Catherine of Aragon. So when he divorced her mother to marry Anne Boleyn, Mary was declared illegitimate and barred from the line of succession. She also lost many of her servants and her title of princess. She was actually referred to as Lady from thereafter. Sadly, she was also barred from seeing her mother, Catherine of Aragon. During this time, she suffered from bouts of depression and other illnesses. However, it's not clear if depression caused these other illnesses or she had an underlying medical condition. Anyway, I got a bit sidetracked there with Mary's law. So character-wise, she is a tricky one. I'm leaning towards sorcerer though. Perhaps she inherited some magic from her mother. Also, unsurprisingly, she hated Anne Boleyn with a fiery passion, which is of course completely understandable, so it's easy for me to picture her as containing this pent-up rage that manifests as fire or some other powerful energy that bursts out of her, completely untamed and out of control. She also has a very ancient royal bloodline, especially with her mother being part of the Spanish royal family, who are the most powerful and richest royal family during this time. Maybe she learned to control her powers more as she became queen. I'm unsure whether to include some draconic bloodline lore in the Aragon backstory. Another option is to go with raw magic. Maybe the source of her powers is a mystery and she wants to learn more about it. So the final person I will choose a character class for isn't a Tudor, but an ally of King Henry VIII, and it's the main man himself, Thomas Cromwell. So like Anne Boleyn, I have a separate video on Thomas Cromwell, where I go into more detail about his spells and stats, which I'll link to in the description. So the class I chose for Cromwell was Wizard, specifically the School of Illusion. The reason I chose this school is that illusory wizards are all about trickery and deception, and Cromwell was a very shrewd statesman. Another school that caught my eye was the School of Enchantment, as Cromwell was very good at beguiling those around him. Cromwell had many careers before working for the king, but it wasn't until he became an MP, a Member of Parliament, that he began to attract the attention of influential people. So are there any other Tudor characters you'd like me to choose a class for? On another note though, this video is a character building tutorial in disguise. This technique obviously uses the lore or backstory to help inform the class. Of course the other way around works as well, but switching it up can help development and writing if you get stuck for ideas. Right, that's all for today folks, and I'll see you in the next one.